episode of Our Point of View Talk Show. We are so glad you guys could join us on Facebook, and we're so glad that you all are able to be here. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and introduce our hosts. We have with us Captain Jackson. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. I worked it out.
You worked it out. Just on time, too. And then next we have Miss Tammy Johnson. Miss Johnson, how are you doing today?
Hello, doing well. How about yourself?
Great.
Good.
Thank you for being here. And we have Miss Cinta Mickle. How are you, Miss Cinta?
I am doing great. How are you?
Good. And we have Ron Peters. How are you, Mr. Peters?
Awesome.
He was my high school teacher. Actually, I've known him since junior high. He was my junior high teacher.
Junior high. That's right.
Wow.
Don't you look good?
He young.
Yeah.
Yes.
He didn't stretch him out.
That's why I wanted him on the show tonight because of his knowledge. Definitely. So tonight we're going to be talking about the destruction of the Black family and who's responsible. So our guest tonight is Mr. Leon Peacock. Hi, Leon.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you? How is everyone?
Good. Thank
Good.
you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you here with us today. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
I am from Cleveland, Ohio. Grew up in the projects of Cleveland. I received a football scholarship to go to West Virginia State College, where I played football, basketball, ran track. Left there, went to Central State for a little while, Central State in Wilberforce, Ohio. Went back to West Virginia State, where I graduated, went to Columbus, took a job in South Carolina the first time, stayed about 3 years, then went to graduate school at West Virginia University. From there, I took a job at Ohio State running an Upward Bound program. Then from Upward Bound, I became a school teacher, working within the city, different jobs, drug counseling, juvenile prison, different jobs, basically. Then I, later on in life, took a job in South Carolina, where I am right now, teaching school, reading, working with kids with behavior issues.
Okay, working with
Great.
behavior issues. Okay, that's good. So, today we're talking about the destruction of the Black family and whose fault is it? You want to start a little bit about that? What is the destruction of the Black family? Just explain that first.
What I believe the destruction of the Black family is the absence of the father. That started the destruction. And I would take it to 1964 when welfare came out, basically, and for whatever reason, they gave us a benefit of fathers not being in the home, which we all understand what it is, how it went. From there, I would begin to say that in 1970, when Black exploitation movies came out, that caused what I would call the maintenance stage. A lot of us that didn't have an identity took our identity from Hollywood. Later on, they hit our community with alcohol real heavy, and that created a tremendous problem. So if you look at a lot of people who were adults, I would say teenagers in the 70s, and when they became adults, many of them didn't actually participate with their children. An example would be in the 1970s. A lot of fathers weren't fully participating with their kids. That's what I observed. So as a school teacher, I began to notice that in the schools, you would hear teachers say things like, it starts in the home. But if you see just the mom come to the school and she's working and she's doing a lot by herself, how do you say it starts in the home? So I began to do the research, and I realized that the destruction of the Black family started with the government, and then psychiatrists, psychologists, and social scientists or social engineers began to do things that gave us an identity away from our families. So that's what I began to realize. The destruction of the Black family was on purpose. When you look at it today, the maintenance of it is Black men. We're maintaining it. But the beginning phase was the government, social scientists, social engineers, and psychologists. Like if you go back and you look up what's called Operation Paperclip, it tells you a great deal.
Okay, now Ron, you were
Yes.
A teacher back in the 70s.
Yep.
Did you experience a lot of your students having just the mom in the home?
Yes, there were students that had just moms in the home, but if I could just add to Leon's comments, and many of them are definitely on point. One of the things that had happened about the end of, because I graduated in 1969, and we still had housing projects, which I came out of. There were a lot of fathers that were not there, but what the school districts did at that time, at least in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from, so I won't hold Cleveland against you. But I did spend time in Cleveland as well. They took Black history out of the classroom.
Yes,
They
did.
also took out discipline out of the classroom. They also took out, they changed the curriculum completely. And Pittsburgh at that time struggled with a plan to bus children to try to integrate the communities. So what I noticed when I came from college into teaching in the classroom was that I'm teaching a very bland US history that had Black history kind of added in just as a mention. And we were just coming off the assassination of Martin Luther King in '68 and also Malcolm X in '65. None of that was actually captured in our history curriculum. Because I taught history in, as Jackie mentioned, in junior high and also for high school. So we're having to try to make up that curriculum. The other thing we saw was that there were no African Americans really involved in the school boards in a lot of our major cities. So politically, they had the opportunity to kind of shape the districts the way that they wanted. It meant that they did not get school books that were up to date. We did not get curriculums that reflected the time period that we were in. So as a result, our kids slipped back educationally, while their white students, the counterparts, they began to go to more parochial schools.
Okay. Now, Cinta, you and Captain Jackson, both of y'all were raised in California?
Yes.
Okay. How was it out in California? Because I guess everybody here in this group is 50 or over, correct? Am I correct for saying that?
Yes.
You'll be okay, Cinta. Bless it.
I tell you, for me, it was a little bit, it was different. You know, first of all, where I grew up in California, in Pasadena, in suburb outside of Los Angeles, I was in an area that was pretty diverse, and the number of friends that I had, and I am truly blessed to have been in that situation. But a lot of my friends that I had two-parent. We're from two-parent households. Now, it's not to say that I didn't have friends that all of them were from two-parent households, but a good number of friends that I had did have two-parent households. It existed. I know it did, but because of where my dad chose to live, we just didn't see a lot of it. As opposed to down in other parts of South Los Angeles or West Los Angeles or East LA, we just didn't see a lot of it. So it was a little different, but I got a chance to experience kind of both sides of it within my own household, but then with friends of mine. And I had tons of friends that turned out just fine, in those one-parent households. However, there were challenges. You wouldn't see the dads at the ball games or see them at the recitals, the ballet recitals or the musical recitals or those events. And mom was burning the candle at both ends, trying to work and provide for the family, but at the same time, be there for her child or for her children. So it was a challenge, but that was a little bit what I saw in California.
What did you see in California, Sansa?
Piggyback off the same thing he's saying when he was talking. I was like, oh my God, that's my childhood. Exactly correct. My parents was married, and out of all my friends, and I'm not exaggerating this statement, they were about the only married parents that we had. So a lot of them was there because my father was in the house. And so I couldn't believe it. I was just like, it was such a norm. And that's probably why they were so balanced, because it was so normal that there was a lot of single parent. I grew up in Hollywood. The area that I grew up was I would say North Hollywood, around that, not Los Angeles, Hollywood. So I didn't, a lot of my friends they bused a lot of kids into my school district from East LA so that they could have a little bit better schooling. So they came up there. So there was a whole bunch of them that was out of single parent homes. And I did see a lot of them with that missing of the parent. And like you were saying, them not being at the football games, them not being at the basketball games. And so it was like, I didn't understand because like I said, my parents was in my life, my entire life. So I didn't get it. But as I got older, I started to see and realize and understand what you were saying. And then to go back even to the schools, when you were talking about the schools and everything like that, we didn't learn Black history. When I did finally graduate from high school, join the military, my first college I went to when I was in the military was Georgia State. And when they started really teaching me about Black history, I was like, oh, what's Black people really did something. The only person we learned about was Martin Luther King. And we would do Malcolm X every once in a while. That was it. That was it. I think they had just made King's birthday a national holiday when I got into the 11th grade. And so, and that was a big deal even then. So this whole segment here is powerful. It really is powerful. And even still to this day, we really have to continue to talk to our men and our children and let them know just how important this is to have them in the home.
Now, Tammy, where did you grow up?
I was a military, they call it military brat. So my first, like 10 years probably, well, once I got in school, I went to 4 different schools. Because I was a military child, I didn't see more or less single family households. And it could be where we were living at. Don't know. Okay. It wasn't until I got into probably 7th grade, maybe 8th grade. That's when I started having a different group of friends who did not have fathers in the home. And but even with that, the mother was so strong, the children never acted. I guess they never voiced about not having a father, unless I just didn't pay any attention. But they never voiced it to me. We was just kids. We just played, did our sports in school, and that was it. And it really wasn't until I got out of school that a friend of mine talked about her father not being in the household, you know. And with me not truly seeing my friends act out because there wasn't a father in the home, I'm not gonna say I was oblivious to everything, but I just didn't pay any attention, but I knew it was there, okay? Especially when I went to visit, you know, saw there was no father in the home, but I never treated anybody any different, you know, because they were my friends and that's all I paid any attention to. It wasn't fact, it's just your mother, then I have both parents. That didn't bother me. It was just, they were my friends. So I think it wasn't until I became, when I divorced, became a single parent myself, then I understood, okay? So, and I see how mothers have to make themselves so strong in order for them to raise their children. And it is important for the father to be there as the children starts growing up. So like I said, I didn't know what they were going through until I more or less went through it myself with my children.
My parents were there. I mean, my parents were married. They had, you know, it was the mom, the dad. There were 8 children. It was a dog. My dad had his own construction company. We had a car. We lived in a big house on the hill in Pittsburgh, and we were on the upper hill. So I guess that was considered upper class. And they had the lower hill. But all I knew was I lived in a house with my family. You know, I had friends, and I didn't go visit them all the time. I saw them in school. So I didn't know who had fathers in the house and who didn't. You know, I didn't know who lived where or whatever. We didn't think about that growing up. It wasn't important to us. Well, to me. growing up. It wasn't important about whether your father's in the house or your mother's in the house. My mom and dad, we did everything together. My dad worked all the time. So a lot of times we didn't see him until the weekend because we went to church on Sabbath on Saturday. But, as far as being a single parent, I didn't know about that until I got pregnant at 16 and had my first child at 17. And then I became a single parent. So I didn't know what to do because I never seen it. And that's when I started dealing with a father not being in the house or not being in their child's life. You didn't have to be in my house at 17, but being in your child's life. So, Mr. Leon, let's talk about the who is actually who do we think is responsible? Because we have to remember this is our point of view. So everybody has their own opinion on who they think is responsible for the destruction of the Black family. So let's talk a little bit more about the destruction of the family. Why is it that it was easy for the male to just to be able to walk away?
I don't think it was easy. I don't think it was easy when it first initiated in 1964 because we were still part of that generation that was taught education is everything. As the brother said, when he was talking about what he saw as a school teacher, they hit us from so many, from different sides. We were very intellectual coming out of the 50s, going into the 60s. It was all about education, work twice as hard to be twice as good, but they were intellectually making us strong. So the women in the 70s, yes, they were very strong. But when the 80s came, when they hit us with psychological warfare from television, when they hit us with chemical warfare with the drugs, then you began to see the young ladies become weaker and they wasn't as strong as the sisters of the 70s. So I always say, basically from up until 2000, I blame outside influences. After 2000, I say it is the Black man because there's something called maintenance. Once you learn the behavior, there are certain things that they put in place to maintain the behavior. For example, you see the sagging, that's maintenance of a behavior. You see trauma, that's maintenance of a learned behavior. But we were not always like that. I was in a foster home for a period of time, and my foster parents, so I'm 61. So in the 70s, my foster parents was doing so much teaching that when my dad came back into my life, she was always, don't hate him, don't dislike him. God put him there. But you stop hearing about God going into the 80s, into the 90s because of the influence on drugs. So I would say outside influence up until 2000. And from 2000 on, I would say the maintenance is on Black men. We are responsible. For example, college educated men could go back into the city and volunteer in elementary schools, high poverty schools, but you don't see them at a mass level. Title I schools are schools where it's grandma raising the child, mama raising the child, and both of those are without daddy's help. So that's college educated men. Coaches normally catch us on the football field. But like John Thompson said, there's nobody developing us intellectually to deal. So now the greatest football players are the ones that are dealing with that spirit of rejection because they're trying to knock a person out because we're angry. So I say today, the maintenance is on Black men.
So you're saying that the young kids are angry
Well, they're angry because they're dealing with the spirit of rejection. And many times when a kid is, a student is attacking me, I've learned as a male to just humble myself down. And while I'm praying, I'm saying, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And eventually he'll come out of the anger and say, stop, Mr. Peacock, stop. And then he'll realize, I'm sorry, Mr. Peacock, you didn't do it. Then he'll begin to tell me his story. So what I've learned, and I'm saying this, excuse me for saying this, but I've learned as a teacher, I had to love the hell out of them because they were so angry that they actually would want to hit you. And I never turned them in. I learned how to redirect them like Tai Chi. They throw the punch and you give with the punch, but you give love to the child. So they're very angry because they're dealing with that rejection. And most men don't know that if you're not there, that spirit of rejection come on the children. And the children say, mommy, and all mommy can do is, it'll be all right, baby. It'll be all right.
Now you mentioned something about the trauma drama. Let's talk a little bit about that. Explain what the trauma drama theory is.
Okay, so I will go with the drama. Take a movie like like Boys in the Hood, or take South Central, which is more like what I saw growing up. When I saw the movie South Central, it took me back to the life of the projects, where I'm getting beat up all the time, I'm getting shot at, until a police officer said, if you become an athlete, all of this will stop. The abuse from your father will stop. The abuse from the gangs will stop. And when I became an athlete, all of it stopped. But I was angry as an athlete. And so when I saw the movie South Central, the trauma on TV took me back until I was able, as I got older, to not allow that to happen, just like Tyler Perry. I'm an unfaithful man. My girl is watching Tyler Perry, one of his movies. Well, he talks about cheating. And so the moment she see it, he's a dog, like all men are dogs. And she started going off on me. And I'm sitting there going, sis, it's a movie. But no, she's going back. She's reliving the fact that I cheated. And so now the trauma has created trauma in my life because people watching the movie. So that's what I've learned, basically. And the only way around it is a love teaching. Other than that, it's going to cause a problem and break things up.
And you know what, Jackie, there's also too, and you know, and that's, I realize this is one component. Unfortunately, there are several circumstances that lead up to these single parent households and who's at fault. I mean, you could just as that situation, you could blame the job market, and in one instance, the lack of jobs, but then in another instance, the lack of training, or where that job had be, or where that job was. I remember my dad was born and raised here in Atlanta, and close to graduation, my dad got married, started a family. And this was back in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s. And my dad was a college graduate from Morehouse and was looking for a job, and found it pretty challenging here in Atlanta to find a job. And if it wasn't a situation where he was overqualified, he was getting passed over by someone of lesser experience or lesser ability to do the job. And at that time, the jobs were in California. And that caused some friction in this relationship. My dad ended up leaving here in Atlanta and going to California, leaving what soon to be his ex-wife and his child here. So my sister was a product of a single parent household because dad was going out to California to try to make things better work-wise. And it just fell apart like a stack of dominoes.
So when he came out to California, was he supposed to go out there and get everything prepared for the family and then have them brought out to California? Or was he
that was the plan. But again, that really, the distance apart brought amongst animosity and when are you coming back and sending money back for the child and so on, because he just didn't come right out here or right out there and just immediately start working. He had to get into the flow, get his bearings, get out there in the job market, and he did what he needed to do, but it was never enough, especially for a situation when you have a crying child on the other end of the country. So it was just tough. But there's just so many different circumstances that lead up to the situation. I believe another one is accountability. Black men just not holding themselves accountable for what they need to do and their responsibilities, knowing that they need to take care of a wife and a child, and kind of letting that go to the wayside, letting them fend for themselves, but not really being as strong as they could be or as they should be. But see, it's got layers, because it just depends on what that individual was taught. Did he have to learn on his own? Was there a mentor, i.e. a dad in the house, or a male figure? So there's many variables that come into play as to why that happens. As Black men, we try to be strong and try to be there for our families. And I shouldn't say try, because we do it, but we just don't do it in enough great numbers that we should. And it then turns generational. It's stuff that's passed along from one child to another child, or another male to another male. And the cycle doesn't get broken. It stays the same.
So Mr. Leon, what do you have to say about that?
Not his dad, but a lot of it is psychological. There's no one to train you. For example, at the age of 10, my father calls me downstairs. He takes a 50-pound bag of potatoes with one hand, say, you catch it and you better not drop it. So I'm used to getting whooped with an extension cord, rubber. So when he throws it at me, I catch it and I begin to celebrate. I caught it, but I've been doing push-ups. He said, and from that point on, every 6 months, he said, you got to get out at 18. Never taught me to do anything but work and be obedient. So when you get to college, you meet guys who've been trained by their father how to treat a woman. The only thing that happened to me, a church lady came in my life and she began to train me. So psychologically, a lot of us began to say, that's not my responsibility. Dude. So when you do a compare and contrast, who is training us? So I would say after 1980, a lot of the brothers backed up. Prior to 1980, we still had the community thought, the village thought. But psychologically, a lot of us were not prepared. When the gentleman spoke about the African history and the different things in the school, we were attacked from so many sides. But truth be told, mind of a woman, you'll never justify leaving your family in the mind of a woman. But how many men think like a woman? You're trained, if you think like a woman, you're a girl or something wrong with you. So we don't share that part. And when he told that story, did you see how comfortable he was? Because he himself has been trained, but a lot of brothers, we haven't been trained to know I should be accountable.
Jackie?
Sir.
Just kind of want to add on to a couple points that were made. During the time when, we can go back to 1968, King's plan was to, it was all about integration. The biggest faction that they had involved in that endeavor was the Black church at that particular time. In particular, the Baptist thing.
Yes.
And within that, there was a lot of order.
Yes.
There was order, discipline, whether there was a father in the house, no father in the house. There was discipline. There was also a sense of value. Even though I grew up in a housing project, there were values that we were taught. And it didn't matter if your teacher was white, brown, or chocolate. There were values that were taught. Morality was taught.
Yeah.
As we began to embrace integration after King, there really wasn't a plan after him to really embrace that part of integration, because he got killed, and many people basically believe, over the economic aspect of integration, which was, now I want to live in white communities. I want access into society. I want access into jobs. But behavior was a very important part of that. So as Leon pointed out, a lot of young Black men started to get their behavior from unwanted areas, such as pimps on the street. They began to see people make big money. And as television broadened its market, it became very attractive. Even when I taught towards the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, it was very attractive for young men to see all this money and the treatment of women. That's what they were using as their mentors and learning stick. So I do believe that fault is shared between not only society and Black men, because we did not pick the ball up. Even if you're out of the household as a dad, you can still reach back and you take care of your children. But if your morality and values change, where churches teach you abstinence until marriage, okay? The biggest thing when I came through was, you better not bring a girl home pregnant. They taught birth control. I spent 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and I can't tell you how many birth control pills I've seen. So for someone to pop up pregnant, it was like, how the heck did that happen with all this stuff that's out there? Mm-hmm. And my doctor was a Jewish doctor, and he said, listen, he said, I'm working at a clinic, Medicaid clinic, and I see a lot of Black men come in look like you, and they come in with STDs, getting the whole neighborhood pregnant. He said, what I would suggest to you, if once you've had the family that you want, family planning, which is a word you don't hear anymore, he said, I would suggest you get a vasectomy. So in 1981, I got a vasectomy after I had 2 children. And do you know, to this day, I've talked to educated Black men. I've talked to Black men that did not go to college. And it's almost like a fight to get them to think about family planning, especially if you got a relationship that's on the rocks, or even if you decide we got 2 kids, economically, we really can't afford any more. We're not making plans for what we want our family to look like. Many young boys don't have a vision of what they want their future to look like. And I think one of the advantages that we tried to offer where you went to school, Jackie, was that vision. What do you want your life to look like? And most kids in inner city, you know, they don't see it much beyond 25. So it's real easy if you know you ain't gonna live beyond 25. Let me pick a gun up, shoot as many people as I can. Let me get as much sex as I can. Let me make as much money as I can, because I'm not gonna live beyond 25. Tupac felt that he would not live beyond 25. You listen to the music in the 80s, a lot of the rappers, especially toward the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, they talked about the fact that they would not live that long. So I'm going to live a glorified life here on earth right now. Big struggle that we're trying right now in my community here, because I have a group of young men called Boys to Men. And it's to teach them there is a transition that men need to go through from teenage to going into manhood. And we celebrate that, and we give them a crossover, which is the kente cloth, as a symbol that you're crossing over. We teach them economics, family planning. We teach them, you know, here's how men act. This is what men do. You know, marriage, finances. My wife does Christian counseling, and you'd be surprised how many people don't seek counseling before getting married that need counseling during and after marriage, and they never get it. And I think it's no secret in our community that we really don't take the opportunity to address mental health. We're really bad on even the medical aspect. We don't do hardly as much as we could on the mental aspect. So these are just some factors that are out there that are within our control that we can address and do in our community. But what I try to do with my sons and all young men that I come into is to assess what their vision is for their lives and to offer them those things. So many people call me Uncle Ron, Brother Ron. You're like a dad to me. I have a 56-year-old friend that said, you took the place of my dad that just passed away. You know, so he seeks out and calls me for advice because he's only been married for about 5 years. Him and his wife were both, you know, had been addicts before. So this is really important that they make it. But he'll call for counseling and whatever he needs to find out. He said, you know, I never knew that. Even though he had a dad in the house, he never understood the dynamics of marriage and communication. And what's funny is when you listen to the marriage vows, especially now with COVID, I think a lot of people understand what sickness and health mean. And, you know, and some people have bailed out. When they see sickness and bad health coming, they go. And especially the kids and the problems with that, they don't think marriage involves that. So there's a lot of aspects to manhood that we need to teach our young men and to be involved with them. I thank God that my mother put me in the Cub Scouts. In the Black community, I was a Cub Scout. But what it taught me was order. It taught me discipline. And I get teased because I am so disciplined. I remember teaching you guys, you know, the discipline of where's your book? Where's your pencil? You know, be ready for wherever you go. Be on time. When the bell rings, you need to be in your chair, not walking in the classroom. It helps prepare you for everything you do in life, even a job. So a lot of our young kids, they don't really know how to prepare for a job. They don't know how to go about keeping a job and advancing their careers. So that's going to impact our community economically. If the best you can do is a person working at Target that cleans off the carts so that nobody gets a touch of COVID coming in.
Let me ask this question. When you were growing up, did your parents talk to you about life in general, about sex, about relationships, about your career goals?
Was through the eyes. And the thing that my mother, she passed away just as I graduated high school. She taught me, I'm going to teach you how to cook, iron, and clean. So you don't ever have to get married to a woman for those 3 things, that you're going to get married for love. So I cook, clean. I mean, I may not be the best cook, but I clean, I iron, I wash clothes. I got clothes in there now. I wash clothes. I do all those things. So my sons they've seen me do those things, and they realize that as a man, I can now contribute. If I can't contribute always with the money, I can contribute by doing things around the house to make the house comfortable, to make everybody there comfortable. to make everybody feel protected. So no, they never did. I saw there were a lot of bad examples. I was just one of those people that said, you know what? I was no good with my hands. Professional athletes didn't make nearly the money they make now. So I knew the only way, as Leon said, that I was going to get through, I had to use this. College was the only way. I wasn't going into the service because we were in Vietnam and many people didn't come back. So college was the only route that I had. And so I was the kind of person that did the opposite of everything I saw that lined up with my vision. And so I usually, even when I counsel people now, like, what is your vision? What do you see for yourself? Because everything, as you know, starts there. If you want to buy a house, where do you want to live? What do you want it to look like? Eric, you mentioned your dad went to California. There had to be a vision, but was it a complete vision? Sometimes people have the location, but they don't have anything beyond the location in terms of where they want to do and what they want to do. So hopefully that answers your question, Jackie.
It does. Because back in the day, parents were too busy, or moms or, parents were too busy raising the kids to be talking to them about life. Because I know my mom and dad, they had 8 children. I was the third of 8. So I didn't have that talk about sex, didn't have that talk about your career goals, didn't have to talk about anything. You had to, figure it out on your own. You had to go to your counselors in school. You had to go to maybe your friends' parents to get those conversations. Because I remember one time a girlfriend of mine, her mom was a single parent. And I went to her and asked her some questions. And she was like, well, Jackie, don't you think you need to go and talk to your mom about that? But it's like, I didn't know how to have a conversation with my mother. It was easy to have a conversation with somebody else's mom, but it was hard to have a conversation with my mom. So,
yeah.
Go ahead. What were you going to say, Tammy?
Oh, no, I'm just listening to the gentleman, what they were saying, but I mean, Ron was correct when he's talking about shared responsibility, because I don't think it's just on one person, more or less. And what you all talk about now, you're right. We don't talk to our children about different things because we're so busy working. And I think my daughter came to me the other day and said, you never taught me anything about sex. I'm looking at her like, nobody never taught me. So we don't realize, our children are looking for answers, and just like, and when they don't get it from us, they do go to somebody else. But as far as my son, I taught him about working. You have to have a job, okay, and getting your schoolwork. But as far as family, he sees family, but the responsibility of being there and taking responsibility for your family, that's what was not taught. And I listen to this conversation, it's like, wow, it is learned. It's something that needs to be taught in the home. And it's not only we're going to teach them, is you just have to get out there and work. And when a man can't find work, he more or less leaves because he can't take care of his responsibility. That's how I look at it, like says our point of view.
Is that a reason to leave because you can't find a job?
Well, if they don't know to stay there and work things out,
right.
Leon, talk a little bit about that. Why do men feel that it's important that they have to have a job to be a family unit?
Because society
something else. I mean, maybe the woman can go out and work, and the man can stay home and take care of the kids.
That's an excellent point.
Explain that to me.
And all males should be taught how to raise children. But society teaches you're less than a man if you don't provide for your family. And
that's right.
That tears brothers up. Because prior to 1960 to 1970, we were a people of order. When they introduced welfare, psychological warfare, and the drugs, they introduced chaos. Most of our children are walking in a world of chaos because we don't talk to them. So as a male, I ask the Lord to give me the emotions thought-wise of a woman, because men don't nurture. Get over there, sit down. Boy, punching you all the time. That doesn't prepare you to maintain focus, control, patience. Now, girls do it. They'll maintain focus, control, and patience and have 4 or 5 degrees. But they don't train the male to do that because we came here for manual labor. Football, basketball, track is manual labor. The intellectual aspect is a training ground, like the teacher said. It's a training ground. They don't train us for that. So therefore, If you cannot provide, you less than a man. And mostly all sisters today are high maintenance. They're high maintenance. You got to give up the cash. You got to provide. You have to provide.
Not necessarily.
I'm not high maintenance.
What I mean is, it's a brother that'll tell your girl, oh, he can't do it, huh? He ain't getting it, huh? I got you. And so you have to, they train us to compete with ourselves and the brother next door. That's chaos. Where some sisters will say, baby, I got it. I got it. You know, they don't train us like that. Where's the team? We're not trained that way.
You know, systematically, we've been, as Leon mentioned, we've been taken out of the game.
That's
from the
right.
very beginning. I listened to something from Paul Mooney, and God bless his soul, he passed away a couple of days ago. And he talked about slavery and how what they would do is they would allow the women to see what they did to men.
Mm-hmm.
And so it made the mother that much more protective of the male child. So she tended to baby the male child, coddle the male child, because she knew what the world had prepared for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you've been systematically eliminated from the game and you don't make any move to say, you know what, I'm not going to let that be my destiny. I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to do what I need to do. Then it's a lot easier. To your point, Jackie, in the 50s and the 60s, what they did was they rewarded women for not having Black men in the household. Because if you were not married and you kind of moved, you wanted to move in, you seen that movie Claudine, right? Where James Earl Jones, he had to marry Claudine in order for them to be together because they would not allow her welfare to continue. So they had to have relationships under the table. So you find out that you have 19 brothers and sisters somewhere over here because this guy could not really stay with anybody unless he was willing to commit to someone. Mm. So that's the system part there that we couldn't control. But now, way down the road, we have more millionaires than we've ever had. But you see the behavior is just as bad as the behavior before. So where did these guys get this behavior, this thing where, you know, glorifying women on a pole with throwing money at them? You know, women feel like, hey, I got to do what I got to do to make money. And our world has become so economically driven. I think we all saw that from the COVID. You know, you check out the prices now. I tried to rent a car in LA and they doubled the price. It went from $45 a day to almost $100 a day for a car. You know, so everything is economically driven, and our kids, we wanted to give them the best. We thought that integration means give them what white people have. And most of us did a good job of that. But you see what the problem is that I was taught you had to earn your way through. Everything came in phases. You had to earn your way through. If you drive a nice car, a young boy said, I'm gonna get that. You know, I said, well, you know, I'm almost 70 years old. So do you want to get it when you're 70? That's great. But to have it at 25 and you don't have a job or an education,
right?
You know, don't you work your way to it? They'll probably rob me at that point.
but you know, though, our parents said that, or we said once we became of age, I'm 52, and the parents, my friends, those in my generation, we said, hey, look, we want to make things easier because we did see the beginning of the 70s, mid 70s, and how difficult and challenging things were. We said that, hey, when we have children, we don't want things to be that bad for them. We want to make it as easy for them as possible, where they don't have to go through a lot of that. So a lot of them got spoiled. A lot of them had things given to them on a silver platter, like our white counterparts did. We may not have had trust fund friends, but we are trying our best to be real close to it. But at the same time, we're doing our children a disservice. You know, when I came up, my dad, aside from the birds and the bees, that was it. The sticking stuff and that was it. There wasn't any more specificity as it related to reproduction and responsibility and the fact that you ought to be in a committed relationship, i.e. marriage, before you have children. So, you know, I was a late bloomer, but not because but I saw the examples of my friends and I was like, ooh, that's not good, because I think I had enough sense to know that if I have, and this is an if, because it doesn't happen in every situation, but if I have, Cynthia and Tammy, if I have a child and I'm not married and it doesn't work, I might have to pay something called child support, and I'm not even working.
Not all men think like that.
And then so now, and I'm still staying at home myself. So where is the mother gonna stay? What about the baby? Baby needs to eat. So that means that whatever dreams and aspirations I have now are on hold because I need to take care of this child because I decided to be grown. So things that I did out of fear because I knew it just didn't quite gel the way it was supposed to. And all in all, it worked out, but it didn't work out like that for all of my friends.
Right.
There were things I just kind of learned on the fly because, and I had to think about, I kind of had to peel the layers back and just kind of wonder, because I didn't ask my dad. He's deceased now, but I didn't ask him what was he taught, because my dad was a product of a family of 10. Wow. So, and my granddad was a circuit preacher. He preached, all throughout the week and on the weekend. And when he wasn't preaching, he was working. So that just left my grandmother, my late grandmother, and who knows? I mean, she was raising children, stair-step children. So was my dad taught that. And then when my dad had us and my brother and my late sister, I think about those conversations and kind of where that led me on my trajectory in raising my own boys. Now I've made it a point to really talk to my sons and engage with them because, and I heard it mentioned earlier, if I don't deliver that message, there's a high likelihood that someone out in the street will, and it may not be the same with the same compassion and the same thought process that will allow the maximum amount of success for my young men, my sons. So
well, I want to go back to something that Pete said. Pete, you just made a comment about women would give kids what they want because of the way the white people had it. So they would give the kids what they want because you see the white kids have it. That's a comment you just recently made. But
yeah. What?
Make a comment on that. Well,
okay.
being that I was a single mom as a teenager, my thought process of it was, I can't spend time with my child because I'm working or I'm in school and the father's not there. So the parents of the teenage girls were buying all these, high-end items or, toys or whatever, or $200 shoes, whatever, for their kids because they felt they had to make up for the fact that the father wasn't there. It wasn't. It had nothing to do with white people. To me, it had nothing to do with giving the kids trying to give them the same thing the white kids had. Because I didn't know what the white kids had. But it was about it was about trying to fill that void of the father not being there. That's why I felt I had to give them so much.
Well, what started?
They got spoiled.
Right, and what started to happen was television revealed wealth that we never saw. Right. And as you get older, you get educated, you see wealth, you travel, you say, wow, this is how people live, this is what they have. And we wanted our children to have access to that same wealth. The problem is you have to prepare people for that. And what I was trying to get to was that, and what Paul Mooney was saying was mothers held, especially male children, really close because they knew what they were going to be going through. So you make it comfortable for them. As Eric said, you start having babies and you're not with the girl, you stay here, bring the babies over here. So what happens, we start to wear our grandparents out. Grandparents are now raising our children. I can't tell you the number of people that came to open house that were grandparents. They weren't even parents. When I came through, parents trusted the teacher, whether the teacher was white or black.
Absolutely.
Now, and we paddle. So they said, "You want me to call your mother?" No, I'll take it from you. And the other struggle that we have that we didn't really hit upon is we've always battled skin color. what we look like, okay? Because we feel, when I came up, we felt that light-skinned people, curly hair got a pass.
Yep,
You know,
long hair. Yeah.
I used to walk around, I don't have any hair now, but I used to try to throw my hair back. You know, you sweat and you throw it back because that's what I saw on TV. He said, my father would say, your hair is never gonna go back. And then I used to look at guys with curly hair and just wish. So there were a lot of guys in what they called the Jerry curl. When you came around, it was called a process. You go look at all the Temptation movies. When you got to be famous, like Sammy Davis, first thing you do is get your hair processed.
Straight
because
perm.
So this way you could transition. You couldn't make you lighter, but you can transition to a greater audience. The greater audience meant that you could make more money. So that's what I was trying to allude to. And you're right. The parents do. We try to make up for the kids not being there. But what if you study finance, and most financial advisors tell you that what we should have been teaching was value, not replacement of time, but value. If I buy you these shoes, what are they going to do? What are they going to change in your world? How's it going to make you a better person? Right. Well, and you notice that in the sometime in the 80s or so, kids started to get beat up over Jordans. You know, in New York, man, up here, they were like, kids were getting jacked up over Jordans. Right. You know, now Jordan sneakers, I don't know what they go
$200 some.
So we were doing these, right? We were doing these physical things to say we have arrived, but as someone said, the mind still hadn't changed, because even now it's you watch all the reality shows, it's glitter, it's glam, it's glitter and glam, but you still have the same ways of thinking. You know, you get $1 million and the people are broke next year. You know, you get money and they don't know how to grow wealth. And you see this glitter and glam, and I don't blame some. I noticed sometimes I'll go on when I'll see a star and I'll look to see their background, where they're from and what they're doing. And I noticed a lot of them now wiping out their background because they don't want people to know anything about them. They really don't want to be seen in what they're doing, because the impact that they have on other people. Even with COVID, they were trying to get Black stars to get out in front to help with the vaccine so we could get over this, since it was taking a toll on our community. Many of them wouldn't do that, but they had no problem endorsing Nike sneakers, Nike gear, and all of the other luxury items that we have. And if you notice, if you see the ball players walking in, they wear the Gucci's. To the hard work aspect, Leon, I think you mentioned you play football. What football teams do now with these guys is they want them in camp because they want to work them hard. They want them to know what it means to be in the NFL. No more easy rides. Nope. And so they don't beat them like they used to, and they don't do two-a-days like they used to, but they're not going to make it easy for you to make it in the NFL. And not that we wanted to be that way with our children, but you want them to appreciate each and every step and each and every blessing that they get, and not take it for granted because my mother makes a lot of money, my father makes a lot of money, so I'm just going to get this, and they total the cards and have no appreciation, because we see the counterparts do that. We want our children to appreciate that and learn how to accumulate and grow wealth. That was the aspect to integration that King didn't really get a chance to roll out. And I heard somebody say something, and I'll stop. If King were to come here today and see where we're at, what would he say? Right. How would he feel about his plan for what he saw America? Because I had a dream, right? So obviously if he had a dream, he had a vision of what this would look like. Are we living that vision? Outside of the holiday, living that vision? Is that dream still alive?
You want to answer on that, Mr. Leon?
I don't believe in King like that. The brother with the grass background, he represents a highly intelligent male. When he talked about Claudine, there are two levels of Black people we're dealing with. Claudine was poverty. The intellectual upper middle class, if you go on YouTube, you'll see what is called selling to the Negro. We achieved so much that they attacked us from so many sides that basically it caused our families to disrupt. One thing about Martin King, when he came to the realization of how he was being manipulated, he began to say things that led to his assassination because he didn't touch it at first. So the one good thing that the brother said, the church played a major role in the keeping together of the Black family. Somebody backed up. If you ever deal with women preachers, they deal with the entire family. But when you deal with male pastors, sometimes they're very selective. There's no way we can have the type of families we have, and the Black church was still as aggressive as we were before. Bringing Black men into the church, conditioning our mind that no matter what you got to go to, stay with your girl. That doesn't happen.
Mm-mm.
We have all these mega churches with thousands of people, you know, and you figure if you've got all of this out there, and the thing that's very interesting, and I hope I don't, you know, I'll just say piss anybody off, but it's ironic that within that structure, and again, not blaming it, within that structure, who is the person who is most advantaged in that system? Yes. Because that tells you a lot about how that system is being handled. If I am at the top and I'm the one giving the voice and the word and the direction, and everybody else is beneath, what does that say about the system that we're operating in? Probably something, it needs to be changed and turned around, you know, because everyone should be coming up, right? At some point in time. And that doesn't happen. What it's become has been pretty much a mirror of what we see in corporate America.
Yes, it is.
You know, and a lot of our young people, they're just not built to play the game like that.
No.
That's going to be a show for another time. Yeah.
Well, you may not want me on that show.
No, we probably did. But this conversation is going to be a conversation that's going to have to be ongoing. I mean, because it's just starting. It needs to start. It needs to be a conversation that's in the homes, that's out of the home, where everybody is participating with. Everybody is, you know, basically we need to bring our village back. We need to bring our village back. We need to get our men back in the house, you know, and it took a while for that to happen, for them to leave, for the destruction of the Black family. So it's going to take a while to get it back. But what we have to do is we have to talk about it. We have to let the Black men know that we need our Black men back in the house. Yeah.
So does that mean the next time those two ladies will say more?
I'm sorry?
So does that mean the next time those two ladies will say more on the destruction?
I think
men weren't talking so much. Maybe we wouldn't.
I did get a chance to come in.
Jackie, no, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Men have more to say about it, you know, because they're the ones leaving. What's your explanation? We want to know why you all left. We want to know what is it that we can do to bring you back home and to fight for your family.
They were intently listening, and I will say this, that what's very interesting is the communication style between men and between women. And smart women will usually listen to try to find out how these men think, because it's not like us. So what the heck do they think about? What the heck do they talk about outside of sports, so that I can take advantage of that and maybe put me in a winning position?
Yeah. And maybe like if a couple get together, a man and woman get together and just basically take sex out of the equation for a minute and just talk and get to know each other, maybe then we would be able to keep the family unit together. We would be able to have, like, you know, a couple who actually known each other, who were friends before they decided to date, before they decided to get married, before they decided to have kids. And then they would realize, you know, this is what we want. We're taking our vows seriously. We want to be together as a family. But this is something that's going to have to be worked on. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. And it needs to happen with younger people. The younger generation is the one that needs to do this, because everybody on this panel is 50 or over.
But Jackie,
sorry, that definition of being a man really needs to be put out there. When I was actually talking to my husband and I was talking to my son, I was like, what is your example and how would you define yourself as a man?
And you know what, Cynthia? You're going to have to hold that question.
I am going to hold it, but I'm just saying that's the one
thing. We'll talk about that on the next show. It's time to wrap it up, guys.
All right.
Really fast. But I want to thank you guys for joining us, for being with us, for starting the conversation, because we need to know when we need to talk about the Black family, about the destruction of the Black family, about the restoration, about getting us back together, about raising our children, about communication. you know, because that's what we're about. We're about the family unit, and we want the family unit to stay together. Mr. Leon Peacock, thank you so much for being with us. And I'm sure we're going to have you on the show again for updates.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about more things. We're
Nice
going to
meeting
talk about the family unit. Leon, thank you. Or Keith. I never call him Leon. That's his first name. He's elder to
But
me.
don't worry.
Keith. Thank you so much for being on. And Scott, Andy, and Captain Jackson, you guys are amazing. Next time, remember, everything you heard and everything we said was our point of view. We'll see you next time. Bye.